and welcome back to a new lesson titled The Trojan Horse Within Your Mind, the Critical Faculty at Work. You'll find an attached PDF with this lesson that has 2 geometric figures on it. I suggest you open it, or if you prefer, print it out before we get started. We're going to cover the last and most important piece of information about the conscious mind. It's called the critical faculty. It resides in the conscious mind, but it takes its orders from the subconscious. In the previous lesson, we learned that the subconscious mind, the most powerful goal-achieving mechanism known to man, cannot rationalize or judge input. That's a pretty vulnerable position to be in, because if a suggestion reaches the subconscious, it will accept the suggestion as a fact, no questions asked. This is why we need a critical faculty. Although the critical faculty is designed to help and protect us, it can also act as a Trojan horse within our mind by blocking out information that we need to change our unworkable beliefs. Here's how the critical faculty works. The critical faculty compares new information with old information. If it matches, it'll swing open the door and let it pass into your subconscious mind. If it does not match or it conflicts, it creates extreme cognitive dissonance and rejects the information, even if it's logical or more accurate. Now, right here, we encounter one of the most powerful laws of the mind. It says that impression carries weight, a weight of belief, you might say. Over time, when a new suggestion from the outside world is stopped and found to be in harmony with our current assumption or belief, it's like accumulating mass. The weight of the new impression is compounded into the pre-existing inner assumption or belief. Through compounding, our inner assumption or belief grows proportionately stronger and stronger. Our subconscious goal-achieving mind works to manifest these inner assumptions or beliefs with increasing or lessening enthusiasm over time, depending on life's accumulating experiences, factored against the existing weight of the first suggestion on any subject discussed. Here's what's happening. The first suggestion goes in the subconscious unrestricted or uncensored. Immediately when that happens, a protective barrier forms around it. Any future input from this point on is stopped by the critical faculty. If the input is familiar or in harmony with our inner perception, assumption, or belief on the subject, it's accepted. If it's not in harmony, then it's rejected. Let's see how this works. I'm going to show you your critical faculty in action right now, so follow along because this is an actual live example. Listen to the next statement and feel how your mind responds. Take a look at Figure 1 on the geometric diagram sheet. We all know the shape of geometric Figure 1 is a square. Now, true or false, not just figuratively, but literally, when I said that, you felt something is wrong. There was that quick conversation in your head that went something like this. That's not a square. That's a rectangle. Why is he calling it a square? The new suggestion I gave you was stopped by your critical faculty. It was then compared against everything that you know about geometric figures. The two were not in harmony, so the suggestion that I gave you was rejected. You're not going to discount years of education that taught you that Figure 1 is a rectangle just because of new input from me. That's your critical faculty at work. Let's do one more. The sky is green and the grass is blue. Now let yourself feel how ridiculous it is to hear something that's so out of line with your inner assumption or belief about the sky and the grass. A green sky and blue grass doesn't agree or make sense, so your critical faculty is going to reject it. In this case, there's no harm done. But here's where the Trojan horse comes in. And this is also what makes changing our beliefs and our habits so difficult. When I first studied how the critical faculty worked to protect me, I was amazed to find out how many programs were running inside my subconscious mind that were not doing me any good. They were holding me back and causing me all sorts of problems. If the critical faculty is there to protect me, where was it on all these days when all that negative crap got in my head? Asleep at the switch? Out for a coffee break? Where did it go on the days that all that junk got in my head? That's a pretty good question, don't you think? The answer lies in the critical faculty's origin. To better understand this, we have to ask, where does the critical faculty come from? Also, when does it arrive? And when is it most vulnerable? You see, when we're born and we're new to the world, we have no perceptions, beliefs, or assumptions within the subconscious mind. That's because we haven't experienced anything yet. Our subconscious is like a computer database that has incredible capacity, but nothing has been entered into the database. Hence, there's no data to judge against. Think about this for a moment. When we're born, if there's nothing to compare or judge anything against, we have no critical faculty. The critical faculty cannot function until it has something to judge new input against. This means that the very first viewpoint that you received on any subject, topic, or idea went into your permanent memory, which is stored in the subconscious, without any judgment. No questions asked. Instantly upon this happening, you formed a perception or an opinion on this subject because now there's something to judge against. And no matter if it's right or wrong, good or bad, true or false, that first impression goes into your subconscious mind uncensored. And only because it got there first, it becomes the perception against which everything in the future will be judged, accepted, or rejected. Let me give you an example. Let's say you bring your child to me, and you say, Robert, I believe in your ability to develop the mind. Here's my infant son, Roger. I'm giving you the job of developing his mind. Now let's say, for example, that as much as I know about the specifics of mental development, I'm not very good at geometry. I don't know the difference between a square and a rectangle. So I tell Roger that figure 1 is a square. Roger doesn't have a perception of shapes either. So this picture of a square goes into his subconscious mind unrestricted. And guess what? Now he has a perception of a square, even though it's a rectangle. In his mind, his critical faculty has just formed a perception directly behind his first input on the subject. The next day, during a subsequent lesson covering geometric shapes, I again identify the rectangle as a square. Now the next day, a friend of mine, who is just as ignorant as I am about geometric shapes, stops by and he tells Roger the same thing. Now, originally, Roger had only one perception in his mind about this shape, but now someone else has agreed with it. What just came to him from an outside source happened to be what was stored on the inside. It's always a very reassuring feeling when we get agreement. And now this brings us to the principle of compounding. Remember, every time the mind receives something that's in harmony or agreement with a perception held in the subconscious, that belief or that concept grows stronger than ever. Back to Roger and the rectangle labeled a square. Now it turns out I've been the one to control Roger's learning environment for the first 6 years of his life. Along with more traditional teachings, anything Roger hears on geometric figures confirms in Roger's mind that this shape, figure 1, is a square. So after 6 years of repetition, Roger is pretty convinced that the rectangle is a square. At this point, you come to me and you take him back. And when you take him home, in the course of assessing what he learned from me, you pick up something that's a square, and you ask him, what shape is this? And you discover that he identifies the square as a rectangle. Now you know that this is incorrect, so you try to convince him that he's wrong. Now when you try to convince him that he's wrong, what happens? He argues and defends his answer. Why? Because in his mind, he knows he's correct. Notice how your children fight and argue when they have a perception or a belief in their head and you try to change their thinking. The problem is, the shape of the rectangle being a square got in Roger's head first, and Roger is convinced he knows what he's talking about. And by the way, Roger's not the only one that this kind of thing happens to. It happened to me, it happened to you, it happens to everyone. So an infant mind starts with no critical faculty because there's nothing to judge the information against. The critical faculty begins to form in bits and pieces immediately behind the first impression on each new subject, topic, concept, or idea received by that infant mind. It's important to note that it doesn't matter if that first impression is good or bad, positive or negative, loving and supportive, or degrading. And even more important, the critical faculty immediately forms behind that first impression, protecting it from subsequent suggestions that may oppose the original input. Conversely, every time new information is received, confirming the first impression is true, the critical faculty swings open the door and allows the new suggestion to enter the subconscious mind. The weight of the new suggestion or experience is naturally piled onto the existing belief like accumulating mass, so it grows proportionately stronger and stronger. Now, let's examine this again from a different angle. All the damage is done from conception to around age 6 years old. Usually by the age of 6, a child has a parent-painted image of self. If a positive self-worth was mostly installed, then the critical faculty will form to protect that feeling. From there, all the good things are compounded and the negativity is rejected. Even if a person experiences hard times later in life, he will be one of those people who rise to the occasion and turn things around. If a worthless, weak, or stupid self-worth is installed first, the child will be a magnet for problems later in life. Even when good things come his way, he'll find a way to sabotage it. The critical faculty is just as happy protecting feelings of worthless, weak, or stupid as it is worthy, brave, or smart. So as we grow, the critical faculty develops by bits and pieces behind each new perception. By the age of 6, we develop a solid band around our perception of the world, who we are, and what we can and cannot do. Now, by the time we're 12 or 13 years old, we've heard something on just about every subject. That's when we know more than anyone else. That's also called a teenager. For the most part, as a teenager, we're smarter than our parents. From here, kids pretty much crash themselves head-on into the rocks, willing to defy anything that conflicts with what they think they know is the truth. At this point, the critical faculty has formed a complete shell around the subconscious, and we're willing to defy anything to prove that we're right. From birth to around age 6, we're also in a hypnotic trance, because our predominant brainwave is theta. When one is in a state of hypnosis, they're in a theta state. If I want to hypnotize you, my goal is to put you into the theta state. When you're in the theta state, I can bypass your critical faculty, and whatever I suggest to you will go into your subconscious mind uncensored. Now think about this. For the first 6 years of our life, we're in a permanent state of hypnosis. At the same time, we're just downloading information and experiences. But the problem is we're downloading them from other people. So you download your parents' behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes, and they become your behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes. But as you get older, you don't see this, because your subconscious and your conscious rarely observes this. So we take on the beliefs and behaviors that represent other people's beliefs and behaviors that are not necessarily getting us what we want to make us happy and fulfilled. They are, for the most part, sabotaging us because we acquired them from other people who can't get their life to work. This can affect our ability to see and understand the true nature of our being and our inherent inner power. The primary message that we usually acquire during our development is that we're just ordinary people and that we have no extraordinary powers. But the truth is we do have extraordinary powers, but they're not available to us unless we know we have them and we learn how to use them. Often our perceptions, beliefs, and assumptions are not in line with reality. And if those perceptions, beliefs, and assumptions go into our subconscious before the truth gets there, they become our Trojan horse. We're literally hypnotized. We're in a trance. And these trances are compounded until we absolutely believe that they're true. Once again, it's important to understand that every time the critical faculty accepts an idea or suggestion that's found to be in harmony with our current assumption or belief, it's like accumulating mass. The weight of the idea or suggestion is compounded into our pre-existing assumption or belief. And through compounding, our assumption or our belief grows proportionately stronger and stronger. So what's happening is our subconscious mind works to manifest our assumptions or beliefs without any critical thought. We pride ourselves on being logical and rational and able to think things through. But in fact, most of the time we're only reacting and making decisions based on what's already stored in our subconscious mind. So your first hypnotic trance began to take shape as a newborn and continued unchecked until about the age of 6. Up until that point, your mind was open and susceptible to ideas and suggestions without any scrutiny. In short, until you were about 6 years old, you spent every single day of your life in the same hypnotic trance. And since you had not developed the conscious and rational thinking part of your brain yet, everything you heard and read until you were around the age of 6 dropped into your subconscious without any reasoning or judgment. And many of the things that you do and you believe now are based on the programming that you received as a child. Everything your parents told you, everything authority figures told you, was literally taken as the absolute truth until about the age of 6. I remember many years ago I had a friend who was a Jesuit priest, and we were discussing the critical faculty. And he told me the church knows about this. He said, if you give us a child until the age of 7, which is what the church calls the age of reason, there's a 90% probability he will be a Catholic for life, even if he's not a practicing Catholic. And now you know why every religion wants to program the child's mind before that critical faculty sets in. It's important to note that it doesn't matter if that first impression is true or not. And even more important, the critical faculty immediately forms a wall around that first impression, protecting it from subsequent input that may oppose that original input. Every time we receive information that supports our belief or assumption, the weight of that new experience or information is piled onto our existing belief or assumption, and then it continues to grow and proportionately become stronger and stronger. Now, around the age of 6, the critical faculty kicks in, and what you're left with are all those impressions. So even though you have an adult mind, for the most part, you're living your life with a child's mind, because that's where your core beliefs are stored. As an adult, you have more experiences to formulate an opinion, but remember, they'll still be shaped by your child mind. So we think we're thinking, but most of the time, we're in a hypnotic trance. I'm amused by people who tell me they can't be hypnotized. My response is, just look at your life. You're a living, breathing, walking hypnotic trance. The problem with living in a trance is that we don't know that we're in the trance. For the most part, we're just reacting to life based on our beliefs. Said another way, most of the time you're on autopilot, but you think you're flying the plane. So while the critical faculty is there to protect you, the potential downside is that it can become a Trojan horse that makes it more difficult to learn new things and change old beliefs that no longer serve you. This also creates a conflicting mind and a conflicting life. In the next lesson, we're going to see how this works and what we can do to change it.